Okay, in this video we're going to go over some basic static routing of a very small network. As you can see here, I have three networks. I have the 192.168.1.0 network here, I have the 192.168.2.0 network here, and then over here I have the 192.168.3.0 network. I also have the network here, the 192.168.255.0 network in between these two routers. Now if I'm going to come over to this PC here, where I have my IP address set, and I'm going to do a ping from this PC, let's say, to the other PC in the 192.168.2.0 network. It's the IP address is 2.10. If I do a ping, my ping should be successful with just the basic configuration on the router, because the router automatically knows about every network that's connected to it. So I was able to ping from this computer through the switch up to the router and then down to this computer over here. Because both of these networks are directly connected to the router automatically knows about those two networks. And I can tell that by going into my router and doing a show IP route command. During the show IP route command, I can see some information about the routes that the router knows about. The first thing I want to notice is these networks here, the 192.168.1.0/24 network. And if you look over here, there's a little letter C next to it. That means it's connected. Connected means it is connected to the router. The 192.168.2.0 network is also connected to the router, as well as the 192.168.255.0 network /30. So these are the networks that are connected. Now these other ones down here, the 192.168.1.1/32, where it says local, that is normally the interface, that's the IP address that's configured on an interface. So this router right here that we're talking about, this one right here, R1, knows about this network, and this network. So I can ping the devices over here on these two networks because the router knows about it. Now, if I was going to try that same ping over here to this PC over here on the 3.0 network, let's try 3.10, what will happen is I will get a reply that says, reply destination host unreachable. Now, that is a specific type of reply that means the router doesn't know where to go. The router doesn't have a route that tells it how to get to that side of the network. So in order to do that, we have to create what are called static routes. It's one way to do it. We can do static routes or dynamic routing. In this video, we're only going to talk about static routing, so we're going to stick to that. In order to create a static route, I have to be able to look at the networks that I'm trying to create routes for, and I have to gather some information. The first thing I need to know is where am I going from and where am I going to. In this case, I'm going from this network here or this network here because they're both connected to the same router. One static route will suffice to get me to the other side of the network. I'm going from this router across the network into this network. Now, I have to know what's called the next hop address to do that. So let's pretend I'm standing in this router right here. In order to get to this network over here, I have to leave this router and go to the 192.168.255.2 IP address, which is the interface of this router. So when I create my static route, I'm going to tell it to go to that router in order to get to the other network. Now, the other thing I have to do is in order for static routing to work properly, there has to be routes on both sides of the network. So if I put a static route here to get to this side of the network, I also have to put a static route here to get back to the other side of the network. And there's a couple of ways you can do that. Now I'm going to go through those different ways. Let's start over there on this router, on R1, because on R1 I only have to put one route. I have to put two routes on R2, and we'll explain that in just a second. So the first thing I want to do is I have to go into config T mode. I have to go into config mode in order to create routes. The command for creating a route is IP route. Let's hit the question mark. And the first thing it says is destination prefix. Destination prefix is the network ID, not the IP address, the network ID that I'm trying to reach. In this case, it's 192.168.3.0 because the network that I'm going to has a 255.255.255.0 subnet mask, which means that the first IP in that range, .0, is the network ID. Next thing it wants me to put in is the destination prefix mask, which is the subnet mask, 255.0, and then it says that if you look at the very first one up here, it says forwarding router's address. So what it's asking me here is the actual IP address of the router that I want to forward it to. I just erased that command, so let me retype it. 192.168.3.0.255.255.255.0, and then it says forwarding router's IP address, and it is 192.168.255.2. Because if I'm standing here and I want to get to this side of the network, I have to go to this IP address. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in. I'm going to go ahead and press enter, and my IP route is in. So let me go ahead and exit out of that. Let me write it, and then now let's do a show IP route. Now you can see in my IP route table, I now have this one here that's labeled S. S stands for static route, and it says 192.168.3.0 via, which means by way of, 192.168.255.2, which is what I want. I want to be able to travel from this router over to this router through this interface. Now, if I was to do the ping right now, my ping would still not work. The reason why is I don't have any way of getting back from the other side because there's no static route. So I need to come over to R2 and I need to create static routes going back. Now in this case, on R2, I have to create two static routes. The reason why is I'm coming from this network and I can go to one of these two networks. And so in order for the entire network to work properly, I have to create a static route for this network and I have to create a static route for this network. Now there is a way to do multiple routes without having to do one static route for each network, but for this case, in the basic configuration, we're going to do one static route for each network. Later on, when we get to more advanced static routing, I'll show you how to do multiple networks with one statement. In this case, again, we're doing basics. So we're going to stick with one statement per network. Again, I'm going to go config T. I'm going to type in IP route, and I have to type a route in for the first network, 192.168.1.0. Subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. Now again, I have to put my next top router. So if I'm on this router and I want to go this way over to this network, I have to use the next top router of 192.168.255.1, or the forwarding router. Either way, you can call it either way, the next top or the forwarding router. 192.168.255.1. Hit enter. Now I have a route that will allow me to go from the 192.168.3.0 network over to the 192.168.1. network. I can test that out by doing a ping. I'm going to try my ping again, and now my ping should work because I have those static routes established. The routers know how to send traffic one side of the network to the other. And there we go. My route is successful. Now, if I was to do that from this other computer, though, if I was to go to the computer on the 192.168.2.0 network and try the same thing, it would not work. And the reason it would not work is because I don't have a static route. I only put in one static route. I didn't put in two of them like I said I wanted to. But let's test it real quick just to make sure that we are still not working. 3.10, and I'm going to hit ping. Now, again, what I should get in this case is I should get a destination host unreachable or request timeout, either one. In this case, I get a request timeout because I'm unable to reach the far end network. So come over here, verify something real quick. Got it. Yep. Okay. Come over here. Now I want to type a very similar static route. Now instead of typing the whole thing over, what I can just do is hit the up arrow. I can come over here and change the 1 to a 2. So now it's 192.168.2.0 because everything else stays the same. The subnet mask is the same and the forwarding router is the same. So I can hit enter and I've now entered that route. I come back over here, let me test again, and I have now connectivity. So now I can ping from both of my networks over here to my network over here and vice versa. So I could come over here on this side and I could do a ping over to the 192.168.1.1 network or the 2.1 network. Okay, and I can come over. I can verify that. I can verify my routes. Let me end this and write it and do my show IP route. And there you go. There's, as you can see here, I have two routes that are labeled S, and there's my two routes: the 192.168.1.0 network and the 2.0 network that are connected to my router. And now I've created those static routes. Now, the problem with static routes, of course, is every time you add another router to your network, you have to create static routes for all networks on all routers. so it can get kind of overwhelming. One of the things you can do instead of putting in individual routes is you can put in routes that cover multiple networks. And again, that's a more advanced topic, so we'll talk about that in another lab. But this is this covers the very basic setup for a static route. Again, you have to pay attention to where you're coming from, where you're going to, and what I would recommend doing is when you're creating these static routes is that you write that information down. Write down the from, write down the to, write down the next hop, so that when you're creating your static routes in your router, it's easier for you to tell what's going on. Now, one problem that I see a lot of students make, or one mistake I see a lot of students make, is they put in a bad route. And let me try this. Let me put in. I'm going to put in this 192.168.2.0 route with a different IP address and hit enter. Now what happened is I just put in another static route. What happened to the old route is it didn't take it out. Every time you put in a static route, it puts in exactly what you tell it to. In fact, if I go look, I now have multiple static routes for this network. 192.168.2.0. I now have multiple ways of getting there, even though the 192.168.255.3 IP is an invalid IP because it's the broadcast network for the 192.168.255.0/30 network. Even though it is an invalid IP, the static route does not tell you when you put in your static route. It will not tell you that you put in an invalid static route. So what I see a lot of times is students put in a static route, they make a mistake, they put in another static route, they make a mistake, they put in another static route, which they finally get correct, but they don't go back and take out the incorrect static routes. And what that does is it messes up your routing table, because now you have routes in your routing table that are incorrect. So the way that you take out a static route is you go, you can either back arrow up to what you previously put, press Control A, which makes your cursor go to the front of the line, and type in the word no. And no is going to negate that route. Now, in the case of a static route, you have to put in the entire static route that you put in. You have to do the whole thing over with the no word in front of it. The reason why is because these routes are very, very specific. So if you don't put in the exact one, it is not going to work. I hit enter, and now I can do an end, right? And let's go back and look at my routing table, and now I can see that I only have the one route now for my 192.168.2.0 network. So you got to be careful when you're putting in static routes. If you put a static route in incorrectly, make sure you take it out, because it will affect your routing table. It'll send routes down the wrong path, most likely, or it will create dead ends in your network, which will cause packets not to be able to route properly. Again, what I see a lot of times when I go into students' networks is they have all these static routes in there, and they really only needed to put one or two, and they've got like 8 because they've made mistakes. You can also see the static routes in your show run command. If you go to the bottom here, you can see these routes. I have 2 routes. Also what you can do, if you have to take a route out, you can do a cut and paste. What I mean by that is you can do like from this position, I can do a config T, type in no. I can come up here, I can do a copy, or a copy and then a paste, and it'll paste it down here, that route up here that I wanted to, if I wanted to get rid of it. I don't want to get rid of it, so I'm not gonna press enter. But if I wanted to, I could just do a copy paste of that to make sure to get it out if I was to take one out. And again, what I'll see a lot of times is I'll see students that come in here and they put in a bunch of invalid routes, and there's like 8 or 9 different routes in here when they really only needed 2. So make sure again you take out those routes that are not needed. And that covers the basic functionality of a static route. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more videos, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and as I put out more videos, you'll get access to those.